It's really giving advocates a tool. So yeah, my next stage is really taking what I learned in e-bike city and making tools and actually giving decision makers and people with the power to change, giving them the green light and to quickly make change.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Active Towns channel. My name is John Simmerman, and that is Catherine Elliot from Winterthur, Switzerland, just outside of Zurich. And we're going to be chatting a little bit about some of the research and the work that she has been doing. And eventually we'll make our way to talking a little bit about an e-bike project that she did, and then also her future ambitions and career aspirations. But before we get into that, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Hey, it's super easy to do. Just click on the join button right here in YouTube down below. If you're listening to this, please consider navigating over to activetowns.org. Click on the support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options. Okay, let's get right to it with Catherine. Catherine, thank you so much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, just before we hit the record button, when we were talking a little bit about past episodes that you've enjoyed and all that good stuff. But let's do this. Let's pause for a moment and have you just explain who the heck you are and where you are.
Yeah. Catherine Elliot. I'm in Winterthur, Switzerland, just outside of Zurich right now. Kind of in between jobs currently. So just finished up the e-bike city project and moving towards, it was a research project, which I'll get into in a second, and just trying to shift research into action now. So that's that's where I'm at right now.
Share a little bit about your backstory. How did you end up there in Winterthur?
So just a bit of background about me. I mean, today I want to talk about how we can actually create active towns and taking knowledge and leveraging it into change. So in that next slide, I kind of give a little bit of a background. I'm originally from Hanover, Pennsylvania, and I come from a big family. As you can see there, I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters. And I'm that little nutball on the bottom right with the little basketball head, because we all kind of played basketball as a affordable sport. And we pretty much had almost a whole team there. So, kind of grew up a real sporty family, always in the outdoors, only had 1 car. So bikes were really, we didn't particularly have real sustainable, childhood, except that I was born on Earth Day. But to get around, we used our bikes. And when the bike broke, you couldn't just run to the bike shop to fix it. We just had to figure out how to fix it ourselves. And that was always a bit problematic. But kind of was into biking, then wanted to learn a bit of mountain biking because there were some random trails nearby. Got into university and did a degree in sport management because I was really interested in sport and health and exercise and wanted to promote that. Could more people also find that love of sport that I had? And finished up that degree in Pennsylvania, moved to Colorado, and did some more degrees, and worked in outdoor industry. And just learned, met a few people in Colorado. It was a bit nicer climate, and had a few friends that taught me how to kind of get into bicycle commuting. So during my PhD in Fort Collins, I met some people who really changed my life, I would say, in terms of thinking of biking not as just a sport, but really getting around, active commuting. I joined the mountain bike team at Colorado State University. I joined the Bike Fort Collins, FC Bikes. I think they changed their name at some point. The bike advocacy group helped get volunteers for Tour de Fat, New Belgium's event that they do annually in several cities now. And I even learned how to repack a hub and ball bearings and bottom bracket from Raphael, who's got a bit of a story you could put. I can send you a link in the outside. He was with the Bicycle Co-op, so really grassroots. For free, I went and picked out a Nishiki. Nishiki was my first proper mountain bike, so I thought as a commuter bike, I'll take a Nishiki that the police had found that had been hanging somewhere forever, and gave it to Raphael, and then he in turn helped people rebuild these bikes and repurpose them as basically vehicles. So during my PhD, I cruised around on an orange lady frame Nishiki road bike, which I had built into a single speed. And I can say Raphael really changed my life, actually, because at that point I started trying to think about how kind of one of the best forms of like democracy or democratic movement can be something as cheap. I mean, it's really your feet, but it can, in terms of getting a bit further away, it can be something as cheap and simple as a fixer-upper bike. And so him giving me the knowledge, actually, of course, then throughout my life, I've been able to continue using it, but to share it with others, I since had built up some other bikes for other friends. And I think that man has no idea how much he's actually impacted others. And to this day, I think they now have 7 bike stands in the Bicycle Co-op in Fort Collins, and it's still going. I keep in touch with my friends there, and they're helping out now. And I think it's a really good piece for social change. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's such a fascinating story, and I love our overlap that we have too. You and I were talking about the fact that, yes, I was just in Zurich last summer, right about this time, actually. It was in late July, I think it was. And so I had a walking tour with Professor Norman Garrick, who is connected to Wes Marshall, who we were talking about, and all of that. But I don't know if you know, but I filmed a solo ride video of me just wandering around Winterthur.
I haven't seen that one.
Winterthur's
got some of the best bicycle infrastructure in Switzerland. So
yeah. So and I think in some of the responses that came back from, especially my Dutch viewers, were like, yeah, okay, it's not quite Dutch caliber, but there's some good stuff there, and there is. It's a suburban context. And there's some wonderful off-street network of pathways. And I love some of the pathways that went past many of the garden plots that are out there that people work and all that. But I love the fact that we have the connection with Fort Collins, too. I used to live in Boulder for a decade, and I know a bunch of the folks who are working hard to transform the built environment there in Fort Collins. And really, just like where I'm at here in Austin today, sort of patterned after the learnings from the Dutch Cycling Embassy, and they've done several of the Think Bike workshops there. And so there's that overlap there, which is how you and I are connected, because we're connected through Chris Bruntlett, the international manager there at the Dutch Cycling Embassy. And we're going to be talking about some really cool stuff that you've been working on and all of that. And I love the fact that you did your PhD there at CSU, at Colorado State University. That's so freaking cool. Which, by the way, is one of the most bike-friendly campuses ever. And I've done a fabulous interview in video of me with rolling through the streets of Fort Collins with Courtney Geary, and rolling through the campus with Jamie Gaskell, highlighting the fact that you've got a platinum level city in terms of bicycle friendliness, along with a platinum level university in terms of bicycle friendliness. And yeah, what years were you there?
I was there from 2006 to 2010.
Oh my gosh, you're going to just be blown away by how much transformation has happened there since then. Yeah. And you mentioned that. Yeah, no, that's great. In fact, I'm going to be there in just a couple of weeks. So I'm going to be there. I'm actually going to be speaking to a class at the University of Colorado at Boulder on the 24th 24th, I believe, or the 23rd. And then the next day I'll be up in Fort Collins filming with city staff on some wonderful off-street network of pathways that they're building out, which is just fantastic. So let's skip on over to the next slide here in your PowerPoint. Walk the viewers through what you're doing here with this wordplay sort of representation.
So this is actually something I came up with, a bit of small research study, just 75 academic staff and some students mixed in there when I was in New Zealand. So I kind of went after Colorado, the PhD. I was in I was actually in Basel, Switzerland for 3.5 years. I did a postdoc looking at exercise and mental health. And it wasn't until I came to Switzerland when I realized, like, oh, people don't want to go to the gym, but they're okay to ride their bike around to get places as transport. So then after this 3.5 years of biking everywhere for transport and having friends that don't own cars, which in the US is preposterous, just you wouldn't think of it. I went to New Zealand, and of course it was back to kind of this American system again. So that's when I said, okay, how can we bring some of this knowledge from most European countries and really get it? And so I said, look, what comes to mind if I tell you the phrase ride a bicycle? Can be positive, negative, whatever. And these are the words that came up. And the most frequent one was some version of either free or freedom. And that's when it kind of hit me. I think, if I look back in my life and I really think about when was the first time I felt free. And I suppose it depends on your childhood and things like that. But for me, it was really when I learned to ride a bike. So at the age of 5. And when I ask that question, many times in the European context, they'll say the same answer. But oftentimes in the US, they'll say when I learned to drive a car. And so then I realized, actually, and I came up with this statement myself, and I don't know if many people agree, but I said, I think everyone's actually a cyclist, if you want to call that, or a person who enjoys riding a bike. They just don't know it yet, because what we all want actually is this thing called freedom, and we're stuck. Anyways, that was really just an exercise to see, and you see some of the negative words like scared, alert.
Yeah, there's a few. Yeah, worry and frustrated, cold. Yeah, there's a couple of them, but the relative size of the word represents the frequency in which they were presented. So freedom at being the biggest and boldest and thickest, and followed by satisfaction and happiness in terms of the size and the frequency in which they were brought up, speaks volumes to the fact that there's something really, truly, you use the word joy, there's something joyful about it. And I think that there was a video many years ago about a character, a really wacky character, I think in San Diego, like maybe Ocean Beach or La Jolla or something like that, who rollerblades. And so his passion, I mean, the dude's in his like late 70s, early 80s, and he rollerblades around, and he talks about how that feeling of movement and how you're swooping and going like this does something in the brain, and it releases, chemicals. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of the same feeling that I used to get when I was powder skiing, doing downhill skiing, and you get this movement and et cetera. I'm like, oh, that also gets triggered when I'm surfing. And then I also get that feeling, people get that feeling from cycling, is that especially, that joy of when you're feeling safe and invited and you've got infrastructure and a society that embraces it. There's a reason why we get that little hit within our brain when it's a joyful experience and not a frustrating experience and not a worrisome experience, that it reinforces habit formation and it's pleasurable. And so I'm not at all, surprised by this word, representation. But yeah, this is, and you're smiling right now. So, I mean, just even talking about this brings joy too.
Yeah. And for the moments, if you look at DC and Ryan's self-determination theory, No one's done this research yet. It's been on my to-do list, but looking at the three things that people need. So this connectedness, this relatedness, and a feeling of accomplishment. And those things, if you can't get them in a normal bike because you live on a mountain, then you get an e-bike and you get all three. But facing this difficult time, so when people say, "Oh, but what about the weather?" I'm like, the weather is what builds your resilience, which we need in life. And I feel like, especially if I look at kids nowadays, they don't really have the opportunity to learn how to ride a bike, to learn how to fall, um, and to get back up. And I think those are the moments where I'm like, gosh, you're really shortchanging your child, not teaching them how to ride a bike, not taking them out biking even in the rain.
Yeah, feeling what it's like to have the elements on you. Now the Dutch have a saying, and maybe the Swiss have the same saying of "There's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing." Do you guys say that there as well? Yeah.
Or they say you're not made of sugar.
Yeah, yeah.
You won't know. Yes, you'll be uncomfortable, but this whole the comfort. Yeah, there's another research saying how comfort actually contributes a lot to our climate, our footprint. Everything wanting comfort. Yeah, you can really
yeah, exactly. And there's a book on my shelf over here, The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, which it gets to the fact that we can get too complacent and too comfortable. So when we think about, especially for parents, when you mentioned like the three things that we want to try to accomplish as humans and et cetera, it might be to it might need to be fast, and we might need to look good while we're doing it. And, from a functional perspective, we might want to transport kids or / goods, groceries, things, etc. I love this slide where you compare a cargo bike to a car, and you've got this. Walk us through this little visual that you put together.
Yeah. At one point I thought about, okay, oftentimes people say, I can't ride a bike, I have kids. And then I thought, well, okay, what about a cargo bike where the car goes goodbye and you have a bike? And so I thought, well, let's compare them one to one. Well, a cargo bike can be fast, especially if it's electric. It can look good. If you look at Ries and Muller bikes in particular, or there's a few others. Transport kids, well, I suppose, and maybe in my family, wouldn't have gotten all of us in there, but you can get a few kids in there. Burns fat for the bike, even an e-bike. We have done research on that. You still do burn fat, whereas the car is more burning the money. And on the cargo bike, you can actually save quite a bit of money. And the thing that you save is your calories and makes you fat. Probably not the most politically correct way of saying it, but yeah, that the car, if you look at car ownership, especially in the US versus obesity, you see this kind of direct trend in the literature. So I just really wanted to look at, what are the trade-offs? Go ahead. Yeah, there's probably another 10 things you could add on that one, actually.
Well, I just want to add one more based on what we were just talking about. Let's add a 6 of, on the left side here, it also, brings joy into your life and makes you happy. Very rarely, if you have a safe and inviting environment to ride one's bike in, it becomes a joyful experience, and you come back feeling refreshed and invigorated and happier for the experience. Versus on the right-hand side, rarely do people say that, oh, I enjoyed my commute, I enjoyed this, I'm coming back, refreshed and vitalized, and I feel joy from this experience. More often than not, the experience of driving, and research validates this, as well as just empirically talking to people validates this, is that people feel like, oh no, that was another yet frustrating drive. And the frustration can be ... You fill in the blank. It could be everything, including just the fact that the more people driving, the less, enjoyable that experience is. So, yeah.
Yeah. You
Just another thought.
hit the nail on the head with that one. The happiness and also the quality of life. And that's, I mean, the thing is, everyone wants those things, but we're trapped in this motonormative society. This motonormativity. You've done an excellent podcast or interview with the authors. It was episode 289, Car Brain, with Professor Ian Walker and Professor Marco T. Bromfelstrath. And I have a colleague here, actually in Zurich. I think his name is on the bottom, Daniel Sutter. He actually went to a classroom and full of children and said, "Hey, here's some markers, here's some paper. We want you to draw. What does it look like on your way to school?" And here on the top left, you see Maria, who's age 10, goes by foot to school, and unfortunately, Samuel, at the age of 7, on the right, is going by car. So if you look about, like you said, that joy and how we get to places and what are the experiences. I mean, the car, you see a destination, origin destination, to use the transport terms. Where the foot, you've got plants, you've passed animals. My friend Tony and I from Fort Collins used to go on rides, and we used to talk about our wildlife sightings. And we're still texting today when we go on rides. Hey, I saw an eagle, or actually the other day in Switzerland, believe it or not, I saw a camel. It was on someone's farm. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, I have to send Tony my wildlife sighting. So, and it's just, when you're going to see a camel in a car, I'm not really sure. But I just think those experiences between the origin and destination actually make life worth living, in my opinion. It could be a rain, could be, we had a sudden kind of hailstorm the other day. We got caught in it, but that's what you call a memory. So those difficult times actually imprint on your brain and cause you to remember them, whether it be good or bad. And I'm just thinking, think of the story this is going to be when we get home, and I feel like too often people overlook the negative aspects, if you want to call them that, of cycling. And I think that's the part that makes the sunny days worth riding, they make them that much better. And so I think for our children, at the minimum, we can provide them with a life with a colorful picture here, just to simplify it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just the fact that there's so much color, detail, and vibrancy to the image on the left that Maria put together. And for the listening only audience, these are two drawings, two pictures, painted. It looks like with watercolors or other markers, etc. And the one on the left is just vibrant and detail and everything. The one on the right is just grays and blacks and whites. And the other thing that other researchers have seen too, when presenting this to children, is we find out that it's almost like a black box. They go into the back seat, they get strapped into their car seats, most likely, and maybe they're even handed a screen, a device, an iPad or a cell phone or whatever to occupy them. And so they also don't have a good mental map of their community. And so it's kind of a black box of how I get from home to school, from school to play destinations, to the park, etc. It's like, maybe if they're asked to do a picture or an image of what the park is like, all of a sudden colors come back and the life returns, but it's a black box. It's like disconnected, and they don't really have a mental map of what their own neighborhood looks like, which is incredibly sad when you think of it. I don't know. I mean, when you were in Hanover, and again, a smaller kind of community, not far from Gettysburg, right?
Correct. Yeah, 15 minutes.
Yeah. Not far from Gettysburg. I would imagine as kids, as a group of 6 kids within the family, you guys probably knew your community and your neighborhood inside and out, and you would like venture around and explore it. Is that correct?
Yes, we actually had there were kind of two neighborhood families. The other one also had 7 kids in their family. And I remember in summer we had squirt gun battles, hiding behind, running around the neighborhood, hiding around behind the corners of houses and garages. And we were building forts and trying to fix the tractor so we could drive it as a four-wheeler, mountain biking and having falling into the rocks in the river, the stream beside. Yeah, we were always out playing. I mean, my parents would come home and say, "Go outside." We'd watch Rescue Rangers on TV, and it was like, "No, go outside and play." We only had 2 channels, so we weren't really too hooked onto the TV, to be honest.
Well, I want to go back to our side-by-side pictures because I was describing the one on the left here, and I didn't even realize that was the next one in the deck here. Is like there's vibrancy and color at the two ends, but the black box, the unknown, is just colorless of that journey. And again, this is what our children are missing when we just dump them in the car, put a screen in front of them to calm them down and quiet them, and they're not engaging with their environment in the same way as somebody who walks or bikes to school. And you mentioned it earlier with your friend Tony of like texting the photos of like cool stuff that you saw while experiencing, or maybe it's not even a photo, maybe it was just you saw it but you didn't capture it. Is that life that we experience at walking speed and biking speed, especially when you're riding relaxed and upright and really taking it in, it's like life at 15 miles per hour or less, life at 3 miles per hour. You feel things and you experience things at a rich level. And I think that this is really played out and illustrated well by these children.
Mm-hmm. And on this one, actually, I put the colorful one on the right this time, but he's going to school by foot. So, you can even slow it down another step, whereas the one on the left is going by car. And you see, the house is very colorful and the school is colorful because those are points that the child knows, but the road is just a black line and there's a few birds. So...
Exactly. So we've got this dichotomy of challenges ahead of us. I mean, you've had this opportunity to experience the West Coast, the Mountain West region. You had the experience of living in Europe and doing your postdoc there in Basel, and then going to New Zealand, which is, again, as you mentioned, very car-centric. And I spent time living in Hawaii too, and maybe moving back there as well. Is that some of these places are just paradises and absolutely beautiful. ... If only cars didn't really transform and change the environment. We talked briefly and mentioned briefly about motonormativity, and really, what Ian and Marco are honing in on is that it has fundamentally changed the way we think. The framing that motordom has put forth, and Peter Norton does a great job of looking into the history of this, is just really transformed and shaped our brains. And so, yeah, we've got this challenge now of, well, how do you reverse that? How do you change that? And yet, when it comes to, cars versus bikes, it just kind of doesn't work. Walk us through how we get past this, Catherine, please.
Yeah, so I spent many a night and day thinking of this. And my conclusion is we need people. We need people in cars. We need people in bikes. We need basically everyone, because to kind of boil it down to the essential ingredients, there's always a person typically walking, but maybe in a wheelchair or in stroller, getting to their final destination. So even if you drive a car, you are a pedestrian. So I guess the thing is to be inclusive. If we want active towns, we can't just focus on cycling. We can't just focus on pedestrians. Definitely can't just focus on climate, because there's so much research showing that moves a very small percentage of people who were born on Earth Day. We really need inclusion. So we need solutions for drivers. I actually think that if we want to call them a problem, well, they're people, so they shouldn't be the problem. They need to be part of the solution. So how do we find a solution? How do we get them out? How do we have solutions for access for people with mobility issues? How do we get autonomous children instead of autonomous vehicles? What about health? What about quality of life? What about people who need their car for their job? So these are the things basically in the e-bike city promotions we did. I did an assessment of 432 media comments on our project, and those are the things that come up. And when I think about that, I think of the Maori proverb when I was living in New Zealand. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It's what's the most important thing in the world? The people, the people, the people. And so I would say the best thing we can do is actually bring those car drivers along, acknowledge, actually, we want the same thing. You're a cyclist too, you just don't know it, because you've been given this motonormativity tool called a car, and we've built the whole system for you to use that car. So, but we don't want to talk. We want to talk about you as a person to bring you along, and so that's where I think the conversation should start, instead of saying, "Well, cars versus bikes." It's very divisive. Unfortunately, it's kind of the reality of the situation. When a car hits a bike or a pedestrian, one of the latter two is usually the one hurt. And so it can be quite emotional to even talk about these topics, but we need to understand, how can I prevent a car driver from hitting someone in the first place? And I think that's where Wes's book, Killed by a Traffic Engineer, is just so critical. And so I would encourage people to watch that interview you've done with him, because it's an excellent point about it's not that the whole system is out to try and get vulnerable road users. It's that we just didn't know any better. When we came up with the car, it was a great idea at the time. We did a great job. Civil engineers did a great job building places for these cars. But when we have this population increase, for example, Zürich will see 30% more population until 2050. When we have that, we realize mathematically all those cars for every single person, it doesn't work. So
Zürich is, if I can jump in, Zürich is a great example for us to kind of look to in terms of that this isn't a war on cars and this isn't a war on car drivers, but it is leaning into what I really try to emphasize here on the channel. It's about creating mobility choice. It's about mobility options. And the fact that, I can jump on the train and quickly get from Zurich up to Winterthur with my folding bike, with my Brompton, and then take off and film an entire session, there in Winterthur. It's that's what we're talking about. This is not some ideological thing where if you do this, you're a bad person. It's about creating mobility options. And I think addressing the elephant in the room that is motonormativity from a productive and productive way in that has empathy for people who are stuck in car-dependent areas in parts of society around the globe, and be able to embrace the fact that you haven't been given options. So how do we create those options, legitimate options that, kind of helps bring people along? I believe that our language has to change. I believe that we have to use the extra words of, rather than calling people cyclists, to say that, yeah, we're just talking about people on bikes. People who happen to, Chris Brentlett, who we mentioned earlier, good friend of mine, he likes to say this is pedestrian plus. you just it's we're not talking about the Dutch have two words for cycling. They had the wielrenner, which is the wheel runner, which is the sports cyclist who is going fast, who's in their helmet and glass shields and in lycra, which is how I got into this world. I mean, I was an Ironman distance triathlete living in Boulder, Colorado, traveling all over the world, competing. As an age grouper, guys, not professional. I was just a middle of the packer guy. But yeah, that's how but that's how I got sort of into this whole concept of how do we create safer streets. I'll never forget September 13th, 2001, 2 days after 9/11, literally 2 days after 9/11, I was hit by a car in Boulder. Or outside of Longmont, actually. And, the driver was distracted, did a left, cross and hit me in the intersection, sent me flying. I was nearly killed. But it wasn't until years later that I really started to understand a little bit more about, hey, this is about our built environment. And those were the seeds that became what ended up becoming my nonprofit, Advocates for Healthy Communities, and then the Active Towns Initiative in 2013. That was launched. And this is not, again, we're not trying to vilify people and we're not trying to blame people. We want to come to productive solutions. So let's take a look at our systemic change of norms to address this from motonormativity to human and environment-centric ways of living.
Yeah, so I kind of sat down and thought, how do we look at this from a systems perspective? So first of all, we need the central, like I said, the people. We need people who in the center there, people who care enough to learn, see, act, and change. And so the two things in your example, you talked about yourself who got hit and the driver who hit you. Both of you actually wanted the same thing, which was to get from A to B without getting hurt. That driver didn't want to hit you. So you actually have something in common there. And I think it's important to focus on that, especially with advocates. And again, bringing up Wes's book, it's actually the infrastructure that failed you in that case. Well, and it doesn't help if someone was distracted, but why are we building infrastructure where all it takes is a distraction for a crash to occur?
Yeah. And when I say distracted, when I say that particular driver was distracted, your point is spot on. What that particular driver was distracted by, because this was Highway 287 and I was on the very, very, very wide shoulder, is he was focused in on the oncoming traffic of coming towards him. And so he was like, I'm concerned about my own health and safety and well-being. I want to make sure that it's safe. And so he's focused on the motor vehicle travel lanes, not this wide shoulder over where I'm at. And so to your point, yeah, I mean, he had no intent. He didn't do this maliciously.
Yeah, and he was actually doing his job. So that's insane. that was insane because it wasn't even like he was texting.
Yeah, exactly.
Oftentimes we always be texting, blah, blah, blah. He was actually doing his job, looking to see if it was safe to travel where he needed to go. And he ended up hitting you. So the infrastructure and look, I'm not a transport planner. I don't have an engineering degree, but I know enough that there is so much happening on the road that if you sit behind a computer and try and play it out, you might not design it perfectly. And I think we need to acknowledge that and have an opportunity to fix it. And hey, let's work with it. It's not to say, oh, you horrible engineer. It's to say, hey, look, actually, this plan has a great idea. We implemented, but it's not working because we see how many crashes, whatever, in this intersection. Let's fix it.
Well, so here's my question for you, Catherine, before you go further, is, okay, so at the core of this, at the center of this, is people who care enough to learn, see, act, and change. That's at the core. How do we create more of these? These crazy people who actually think this.
Yeah. So I turn it back on you because it's like, what was it that took you to flip?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So, several years later, after that crash, first I had to heal, then I had to get enough confidence and feel like I could get back out on the road because I was traumatized. I didn't want to get back on the bike. I didn't want to get back out there. But eventually, years later, it did. I eventually made a change from Boulder, Colorado to Honolulu, Hawaii. And when I made that change to that environment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like an environment where it is so hostile here. Going from Boulder to Honolulu, I was like, oh, hey, I'm moving to paradise. I'm going to be able to train every day and I'm going to be able to swim, bike, and run and da-da-da-da. I was supposed to race Ironman Canada that year up in Penticton. And I was just blown away by how hostile paradise was. Drivers were aggressive. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And I panicked. I sold my bike. I withdrew from the race. I bought a surfboard. I joined a canoe paddling club and immersed myself in Hawaiian culture. And that's what I did. Well, a year later, fast forward a year later, I moved to a different island. I moved to the Hawaii island, and I moved to Kona, the birthplace of Ironman. Not really the birthplace, but the home of Ironman World Championships. And I fell back in love with getting out on the bike, etc. And that's when the epiphany happened. For 15 some odd years, I'd been about creating healthy environments in corporate campuses and trying to encourage people to live a healthy, active lifestyle in those types of environments, manufacturing environments which supported healthy, active living. And that's when the connection really solidified in me that, oh, duh, our built environment, our communities, if we make them safe and inviting for people to walk and bike to places, to your point from earlier, it's not about a workout. It's about, hey, can you get low levels of moderate levels of physical activity in just going about your daily life? And so that was the epiphany. That was part of my origin story of making that transition. And then very soon after that, I fell down the urbanism rabbit hole, met Dr. Richard Jackson, who was at the UCLA at the time. He became a mentor for me and talking about, it really is about understanding that transportation engineers, city planners, and architects, you're all public health professionals too, because what you do, what manifests from your work, your professional outcome, influences and impacts and can promote and or inhibit physical activity, thus public health and well-being, including mental health and well-being too. So yeah, that's part of my origin story and how that came about. It was a slow burn. It took me a while to get from, et cetera, to, okay, let's launch this nonprofit in 2011. Let's start the Active Towns Initiative in 2013. And then lo and behold, next thing you know, I'm doing this. Yeah. And meeting amazing people from all over the world.
Yeah. Actually, you have a quite impressive resume of people that you've spoken to. So I'm sure your knowledge every time you meet someone is increased. And so what I would say in terms of advocacy, I put that kind of at the top because I think that's the real pinnacle of where things get started, because that's where people like you, people like me, anyone who has kids and had a near miss on a bike is probably fired up to make some change.
Yeah. Can I jump in and say that it's funny that you mentioned that, because you talk about, the list of folks that I've had the privilege and honor to have on the channel. I can tell you that many of them from an advocacy world, that's what motivated them. That's what got them started, was realizing, in fact, Tom Flood, who's one of them, he jokes about it and says, yeah, if you want to become, if you want to know the origin story of most of us as activists in this safe streets world, it's because I was just a parent trying to take my kids to school, walking or biking, and realized how hostile the environment was. And that motivated me. And so, yeah, that's one way for people to care enough to learn, see, act, and change the built environment. It shouldn't have to be that way, but unfortunately it kind of is.
But and I guess in kind of a negative way, but someone like the numbers of people who have had crashes globally is so high that there should be plenty of us out there. I mean, even as a pedestrian, you don't have to.
Yeah, and to mention that, to follow up on that, yeah, it is kind of a negative thing. Kind of sort of happened to me. It was still even slow burn, even for me. But an episode. We're recording this, folks, on August 7th. I'm not sure when this episode's going to go out, but just last Friday I released my episode. It was actually the premiere episode for season 10, which was Families for Safe Streets. Again, the club that no parent wants to be a part of. It's the club where they've lost a loved one, many of them children, to motor vehicle violence. And again, it's negative, but that is, to your point, that is one of the things. It's like those traumatic events, gets people motivated to change the world. So
I think if we get those people fired up, they can do some, and I'll just travel left here, cool, fun events. And what we found with exercise, and I think it also works with bicycling and walking, is not making it a cycling or walking event. We do need sport in its own right, sport for sports purpose, but we also need things like Tour de Fat. It's not about the bike, it's about the bemusement. That event, if you want to fire up cycling in your city, you get Tour de Fat, New Belgium Brewery, those guys, 2 thumbs up. You get them to come to your city and make cycling fun. They block off the street and do a city cycling carnival through the city. They end up with beer contests. They usually, at least in Fort Collins, they give away a custom bike to someone who gets rid of their car. So it's this whole festival around the love of a simple machine. And they have plenty of car shows. In Pennsylvania, I can't name how many car shows they have every year. Why can't we do something, a bike show? Why can't we have these celebrations of the vehicle? And that's a great image of Tour de Fat. Is just, oh my gosh, it's just so much fun. You dress up in costume, you ride your bike around, and then you party. And there's all different types of bikes they have. You can try out tandem bikes and all different things. And it's just fully creative, fully artistic, and just fun and social. So that, to me, having these types of events that aren't just, it's called Tour de Fat because it's a fat tire bike, but it's not a cycling event per se. It just happens to be the mode they use. And we found that in exercise when we say, oh, we're going to get together and chat. By the way, what do you want to do? Oh, yeah. In order to do that, we're going to walk there. So there's this kind of background goal of achieving, like, bike is cool, tick box, but that's not the main aim of it, because if you try and go for that, you're not going to achieve it. And then I got into research, so e-bike city project. I really think there are people who try and put research just to delay their action. So I think that happens, but I think it's important when you do research to publish things like, here's our final book that is has the visuals. It's very readable for a lay audience. There are some technical terms in, and what we did with this was we created visuals. We worked with we put these in the back so that people could pull them out. I'm kind of backwards on my camera. Here's a visual from the perspective of a pedestrian. We have one from a driver and one from a bike. But we wanted to include something that a planner can actually put these on their walls and start to have those visions. So of what the future can be, because if we don't have it, it's hard to just sit here and talk about it. And then the other thing is the technical tools for planners. So currently, like I said, I'm in the middle of jobs. I'm actually just got hired for a planning and engineering firm where they use a tool called Visum to, when they have to redesign a street for the city, they basically look at the traffic flow and the speed and all that fun stuff. But I had a talk with them. I said, what do you guys do for parking? That's your first step, is look at parking, car parking, on street car parking. And they didn't really have a tool for that. They look at it, of course, but they don't have a tool. And that's what I said, okay, we need to redesign your planning tool. And so as a result of this e-bike city project, two other researchers have developed a startup with the tool. And so I'm going to work in the nexus between their startup and this engineering firm, and we're going to create a tool that can replace all planning tools because it will consider parking, it will consider the bikeability, the walkability, and it will consider even the speed limits and how that impacts not just the traffic, but quality of life, health, etc. So we're redesigning the tool from the bottom up, working with planners, and I'm really excited to actually take that little bubble of research and take the technical tool that we've developed from it and develop it further so that we can use it in practice. And that's where that final bubble comes up with the wall between, because what happens was, as the project coordinator for the e-bike city project, we had somewhere between 12 to 15 years, man years, I think they call it, of work that went into that. And then we presented it to the politicians, and they said, well, we don't know about taking away all that car parking. All those one-way streets you have, we're not sure how that works. So what I propose, if we want to change the system from motonormativity, we need to not tell the politicians what to do, to work with them. And part of that is giving the planners who provide the different urban designs, part of that is giving them the right tools to use so they're not just looking at cars and traffic. They actually look further, but they don't really have tools. They're working with an abacus, and we're asking them to do, something that you need a graphing calculator for. So it's really unfair to expect then the politicians to say, oh, yeah, we think this should work. And then people go out there with a pitchfork saying, you took my car parking. And so that's where this political will really needs help, linking to the advocates, linking to the researchers, linking to the planners, so that they can. Because I think in general, they want to get voted for again. They want to keep their political job. But if we can make it understandable that the city will benefit from it, people's quality of life will improve, then I think they'd be like, okay, what's this all about? And how do we do it? And so from the research perspective, my proposal to researchers is make sure you make your results accessible. Tom Flood on LinkedIn, follow him. Marco, follow him. They take research and they put it in a very visible manner that you can send to 1,000 people with a click of a button. And now everyone understands induced demand, So the research is very important to visualize. And then not just, if you can take it to the level that we took it, which was 3D visualizations, that is key. But at least getting it in the hands of the people so they can say, hey, we want that. We like that. And our research did show when you put more green in the images, people are more likely to approve of it.
It's interesting, too, that, when we look at the bubbles to the left and the upper area there, we've got advocacy and we've got cool events and unrelated to bikes, or it's okay to be unrelated to bikes, but it's really about reinforcing the joy of what it means to be able to get around one city without being tethered to a car, and that being the only way that you get around. But that's foundational, I think, to ultimately what we need to feed the bubble in the middle of the people who do care enough and, to learn and see and act and change. Part of what gives the politicians, our elected officials, the political will to follow through and then work with the technical professionals within the city staff, and backstopped by the research of saying, yeah, this is how we achieve a better city, a more livable city, is we need to have more mobility choice. And oh, by the way, it needs to incorporate the green, and it needs to be a beautiful experience, et cetera. The more that the politicians, the elected officials, believe that, oh, they've got my back, the constituents, the voters that have put me here are speaking up in volumes loudly that this is what we want. We want a more livable community with mobility options, with mobility choice. Then suddenly they have that backbone. They have that political will. And so I like to reinforce that if we want to do our jobs as, advocates of healthier places and places that are active towns that really help create a culture of activity, we have to make sure that we've grown our support to a level and awareness, keeping in mind that the majority of people are just busy living their lives. They don't think about this stuff like we do. We're wonks. We're thinking about this. We're in it all day long. We're echoing things in our bubble all the time. We need to be able to permeate out into the ether of the general population and get them feeling like, oh, I care enough about this stuff. And it doesn't have to be a tragic event that makes me care about it. It needs to be something positive, a vision of the future. And I want to pull up your little video that you have that's really cool, that talks about, brings to life this vision that you're talking about. Before I play this, though, when you mentioned the technology side and that whole aspect of creating a system that better is a tool that better looks at what we need to do for the future. One of the things that absolutely drives me nuts about how traffic planners do things is they take a look at a street and they say, well, our current VMT is this, and vehicle miles traveled, and the number of vehicles that are on this street is this, et cetera. We need to make sure that we accommodate this. I'm like, time out. Is this street actually working for you? Is this consistent with the vision that the community has and the politicians, the leaders have? Or is this a strode? Is this an unhealthy, unproductive place that's sapping the life out of the community? Why would you want to continue to support that? Maybe what needs to happen is, completely redo this. So I always like to say that we have to take a step back and start at the foundation and say, is this really what we want in our city?
Where are the people? Where are the people in your design? You've designed for cars.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like Utrecht saying, no, that was a bad idea. We didn't really want to drain this canal and create a motor vehicle highway through the middle of our historic core, adjacent to the historic core. We made a mistake. We're gonna correct it. We're gonna bring the canal back, and we're gonna kick the cars out of that area. But by doing that, we're welcoming it up for people. Oh, by the way, it's not a war on cars. If you still want or need to drive your car through that space, you still have 2 lanes. You still are able to get around. Again, mobility choice. So I just wanted to point that out, that in talking about tools that help with this whole concept of, I think we have to start at the foundation of, okay, first, what is the vision of our city? Do we want this street, these areas to be auto sewers, or do we want them to be lively, equitable places, equitable city? So let's play the video here.
In Switzerland, transportation produces 41% of CO2 emissions from energy combustion, which is more than in the USA and across the European Union. Traffic jams are commonplace, and by 2050, populations in Swiss cities should grow by another 30%. Traffic simulations by researchers at ETH Zürich show that there is a solution to increase the capacity of streets and reduce emissions. Reallocating more street space for sustainable modes can improve safety, efficiency, access, and sustainability in a way that everyone's mobility needs are met. Decarbonizing transportation while improving the freedom of travel requires integration of micromobility and public transportation. By transforming streets, we can strengthen public transportation and micromobility and provide safer and more attractive spaces for pedestrians. Emergency and delivery vehicles, as well as mobility vans and tradespeople, will have access to all buildings through a parking reservation system. Better access to wider, separated bike lanes will increase safety and convenience for all ages and abilities. Children could enjoy cycling to school safely. Increased bike parking and more publicly shared micromobility would provide last-mile connections for commuters and visitors. More space designated for micromobility means people would benefit from less crashes, reduced stress, and improved health and well-being. Based on research, redesigning streets is a quick and cost-effective solution that would work if implemented. People can regain autonomy and enjoy the freedom of movement without owning a car. By combining public transport and micromobility, we occupy less street space and make the city more livable for everyone while achieving emissions goals for transportation.
Yeah, so let's play this Equitable City video, and immediately afterwards we can talk a little bit about this project, and that's what we'll wrap up with is reflections on this.
What if cities reallocated 50% of their road space to micromobility, such as bikes, cargo bikes, and e-scooters? This pioneering plan is at the heart of E-Bike City. Developed in collaboration with engineers, city planners, and residents, this project is reshaping the future of urban mobility. E-Bike City creates a sustainable, livable community by prioritizing micromobility to reduce emissions and enhance daily mobility. It promotes safe walking and cycling alongside public transport, empowering people of all ages, and encouraging regular physical activity. E-Bike City places a high priority on accessibility. Ambulances, delivery vans, taxis, and other service providers can still reach every building. Users of micromobility will benefit from expanded road space and ample bicycle parking. How will an E-Bike City affect you? The redesign prioritizes pedestrians, micromobility, public transport, and green spaces. With a dynamic road allocation system, major roads adapt to changing demand. On sunny days, more space is given to micromobility. On rainy days, public transport takes priority, and when necessary, space is made available for cars. But what about the costs? It's a valid concern. But engineering estimates indicate that the expenses will be reasonable. These costs will be offset by reductions in accidents and fatalities, lowered emissions and noise pollution, and benefits to health and well-being. E-Bike City is not just a visionary plan, but a toolkit that can be adapted by any city. With this open-source toolkit, cities can pave the way for sustainable urban mobility and create livable streets that everyone can enjoy.
Love it. What's fun too on that is if I'm picking up the accent right, that sounds a bit Kiwi.
No, that was a AI generated voice. So
oh my
I'm not
gosh.
Sure.
It was funny because there was like a little bit of a lint of like, yeah, there's a little bit of an accent to that. It was funny too. It was hard for me not to jump in and say, "Ooh, we talked about that. We need to have, access to green, as well, and integrated into that." One of the great things that I noticed, especially last year in traveling around Europe, was especially in the Netherlands, was really an emphasis on more green infrastructure integrated with the active mobility infrastructure and the transit infrastructure. Is just fantastic, and especially a dedication to more wildflowers and more opportunities for pollinators, and so and stormwater runoff and all sorts of rain gardens. Just a wonderful biophilic sort of approach to, again, making these experiences, the ride, the walk, etc., using public transit, that much more enjoyable and pleasant for people. Beautiful. Yeah. So let's go ahead and wrap up by having you talk a little bit about that next phase for you. And I know we could probably keep talking for hours and hours and hours, so I can't wait to bring you back on the pod, or better yet, I want to return to Winterthur and do a bike tour with you.
Yeah. Why not? And I think there's a new section they're opening up next April. So, yeah. So now, going back to that graphic with the people in the center and advocacy at the top. Now, I'm working part-time with an advocacy group called Moveable. And I would encourage everyone to check it out. They're looking at bringing people like you and me to connect through their platform to the people fixing roads. So getting you to have a say when, I don't know if you've seen the New York Times yesterday just had an article about a 7-year-old in North Carolina who got hit by a car. I think it was on his way to school. You can actually go there, take a photo, and say, look, this is on my kid's route to school. You post it either on the website or through the app. If he's walking, you can post it to a Walkable website. If he's on a bike, you can post it to Bikeable. And soon we're coming out with Schoolable, which is looking specifically at routes to school. And Moveable in general is also looking at the handicap accessible areas, stroller accessible areas, anywhere where there's bad infrastructure that can be improved. You take a picture and there's someone on the other side, assuming you have a city council or a municipality that's happy to work with this app. They'll be looking at it. And for an example, in Switzerland, we have over 20,000 spots reported since 2017. Already 1,200 have been fixed. 1,200. So this is really the opportunity for advocates to get on board, especially for Bikeable. We already have quite, you've got League of American Bicyclists, you've got People for Bikes. If those people who are members of those groups, like Fort Collins, would like to work with us, it's pretty much, it's free to post your spots. You can do it today, bikeablecity.org. Walkable.ch, I think is walkable-world.org is the global one. So it's a global movement, but we started in Switzerland, and it's really giving a voice. And yet you can upvote on the different posts so that they can see, it's actually First Street and Brown Street that really people are complaining about, and we can start to take our voices instead of just complaining to each other. We can post it. And the nice thing is that then there's a history and a timestamp, and you can say, hey, this spot has been, you may think it's only been a month, but it's been 2 years since I've entered it, and what's going on. And, I almost got hit there again, things like that. So as an advocate, you can, or just as a person, you can have a voice. And our idea is to really link the people, the citizens, with the people in charge of infrastructure, the change makers. So yeah, there's Walkable. You can change it to English, and there's a map. You can take a photo. You don't have to take a photo. You could also do a screenshot. You can enter in, like you and I probably have 5 spots that we can't stand on our bikes that we know of off the top of our head. You can get on bikeablecity.org right now and post 5 spots, your top 5 on your commute. And you can do screenshots on a Google Maps and probably find the issue. And so it's really giving advocates a tool. So yeah, my next stage is really taking what I learned in e-bike city and making tools and actually giving decision makers and people with the power to change, giving them the green light and to quickly make change. And yeah, so that's exciting, really exciting time for me. I'm happy to connect. I'm in LinkedIn, so if any of your listeners want to connect, it's just Catherine Elliot on LinkedIn, and send me a message if anyone's interested in looking at either of those tools, because that's my job kind of moving forward, is to actually take the research and make change. It's nice to do research and be like, wow, look what could be, but when you deliver it to the politicians and they sit there and they're like, I'm not sure, and I'm like, okay, you're going to be sure, because we're going to make a tool for the people, for the engineers, that it's going to be irresistible by the time we're done with it. So that's my vision. And if you go on our ebikecity.ch website, you'll get to our brochure. You can print out some of our posters. This one was made with the cyclist in mind, but we also have one for a car driver. And you can print those out if you're a planner, put them on your wall, and let's start getting the vision out there. Corbusier, gave us visions of cars, and it's no wonder it's not just car marketing. It's not the Studebaker marketing team who got us all into cars. It was actually what was sold to the municipalities, that they should deliver these cities for cars. And I think it's time that we start to have streets for people. And Active Towns is, I think, what you're doing is an excellent work towards achieving that. So thank you for getting the word out and promoting these types of activities. So yeah,
well, you are quite welcome, and I want to pop on over to that website again. Bikeablecity.org is that landing pad for that, and again, walkable.ch is the master or the home site there. Catherine, this has been so much fun. Now, here's my final question for you: do you ever make it back to the States?
Yes, I do. It might be another 4 years until I get back.
Okay.
But no comment. Yeah, I do. And yeah, I do. Especially during Christmas. I was just back for Christmas, actually.
Oh, you were? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, one of these days we need to connect here, in the States, and wherever I happen to be, whether I'm still here in Austin or if I'm in Hawaii or wherever I'm at, I'd love to give you a bike tour wherever I end up landing and show you around. But in the meantime, next time I'm in Switzerland, I will sure to look you up and get on the bike and do a little tour around your beautiful town of Winterthur. Again, thank you so much, Catherine Elliot, for this wonderful little chat here on the Active Towns podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, John. Appreciate it.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Catherine. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, I'd be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. Just click on the subscription button down below and be sure to turn on all notifications by ringing that notifications bell. And again, if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Again, super easy to do. Just click on the join button right here on YouTube. You can also give a YouTube super thanks or navigate over to activetowns.org, click on the support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options, including becoming a Patreon supporter. You can also buy me a coffee or make a donation to the nonprofit. Again, every little bit helps and is very, very much appreciated. I simply could not do this without you, so please consider doing so. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers. And again, just want to send a huge thank you to all my Active Towns ambassadors supporting the channel here on YouTube, YouTube memberships, YouTube super thanks, buy me a coffee, Patreon supporters, as well as supporting the nonprofit. Again, I simply could not produce this content without you. Thank you all so much.